and put time so you can hear our pop cans and our things.
Chewing gum. Looks like there's another joint meeting with Louisville. It's Friday, maybe?
Friday, yeah, with their city council. And you're welcome to attend if you'd like. It's in the library. There's a conference. As you go in the front door, there's a conference room right at the end of the main hall to the right.
Okay.
Who's recording? Who does the camera? It's automatic. Is this the new system?
I think it started
It wouldn't have crowded you so much if I knew there was no one's
Different systems, but I think this is the precursor to that new system.
Oh, okay.
I guess we'll get started because I don't want people to just be staring at us.
Calling the meeting to order for Open Space Advisory Committee, May 13, 2015. This is Chairperson Tricia Dunham.
Committee member Matt Morris.
Committee member Tracy Collin.
Trustee Liaison Sandy Pennington.
And staff liaison Allison James.
We don't have a public available, so I guess there will be no public comment this evening unless some public arrives and they can comment later. Hi. I'm not sick. You guys can.
You guys want to just push on your mic and then say who you are.
Sharon Tedeschi.
Ken Lish.
So Allison, agenda item number 3, updates and look ahead.
Arbor Day recap. It was a little rainy that day, but successful. We planted approximately 12 trees, and OSAC Chair Patricia Dunham volunteered for the OSAC booth, and we still had approximately 40 to 50 people, even though the weather wasn't that great. The next item is the beginning bird walk, which will occur on May 16th, which is this Saturday, at Autry Park with wildlife ecologist Ashley DeLob and sponsored by OSAC for all ages and at no cost.
What time is that, Allison?
That is from 9 to 11. The next item is member reappointments. We have 3 member terms that are over on June 30th. Patricia Dunham, Sharon Tedeschi, and Matt Morris. Are you interested in continuing to serve on this committee for a 3-year term?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
I'm not going to at this time.
Please note that Patricia Dunham and Matt Morris will continue to be members of this committee, and Sharon Tedeschi is stepping down. The next item is the COSA Conference dates and session schedule, which is going to occur on September 14th through 16th in Snowmass in Colorado, which is approximately a 3.5-hour drive. Currently, the request for proposal stage is occurring for the sessions, and there is no session information. And this is one of the educational opportunities that the OSAC committee typically participates in, as well as a staff member. The next item is formal committee recommendation procedures. And the town attorney wanted us to note that the group can discuss and have processes in our agenda via email, but especially if time isn't adequate for the topics, the process going through email is fine, but all official recommendations need to be made during the meetings.
And all votes.
Yes, all votes and recommendations, all formal recommendations. The last topic is the Shan Shan naming process, and I looked into some of the history of how 2 of the other parks were named, and I just wanted to let the members know what the processes were. The naming process of Autry Park was held, and the first step was a naming contest for the community. Then ProStack and the Historical Commission gave input, including family names associated with the parcel that the park would be built, where the park would be built. And some of those family names were also occurring as submissions from residents during the contest, which kind of melded nicely with some of the ideas that the Historical Commission had proposed. Then the ProStack members were polled on the names, and they voted on which ones they liked. And then the top 3 names were recommended and went to the town board. And then the naming process for Founders Park, there was another contest, and the participants could submit their idea for a name with a brief description of why they thought it was the best name for the park, and they did it via SurveyMonkey, which is a website for surveys. And the ideas were reviewed by ProStack, who then chose 5 of the names. The 5 finalists received gift cards to local businesses as a prize, and the 5 names were presented to the town board for the final selection.
So do we want to talk about what we'd like to do going forward with Shan Shan?
So we've put it on that we were looking at it, that we keep calling it Shan Shan, and that all of the open space sort of in town is just named open space, and if we wanted to put a process in place for naming our, official open space areas. So I don't know that we necessarily have to discuss it tonight, but Allison was looking into how the process went for other parks and parcels in town. So do folks want to move that to a further agenda item and look at the other 5 or 6 that we have on here? Or we can discuss it a little bit.
Seems like we have a pretty full agenda tonight. You want to just put it on next month's agenda, and we can take it on then?
Yes. So Allison, if you can just add that to next month's agenda.
Do you want this to be accomplished in 2015?
I don't think we've decided, we just sort of were looking at it that we keep calling it Shan Shan, just because that's what it was before it was purchased, and we were just percolating over that.
It probably will take a good 4 to 6 months for process. This is not, the world will not change if this doesn't happen.
No, it was just more.
But it will, by the time it gets through. Let's say you decide you want a contest and you want a Historical Commission input and you want to discuss it at a meeting or 2.
I think, yeah, we should add it to an upcoming agenda, because we weren't just looking at that. If we end up naming one, we'll probably look at naming all of them that are not named, that might be out there.
Which ones are not named?
I think there's a couple. I'm not entirely sure.
I can look that up and send it to you.
Yeah.
Sean, do you just want to introduce yourself, just hit the push so it goes on, and just...
Hi, Sean Samuelson.
So discussion, agenda item number 4 is having a brainstorming discussion about the creek corridor and anything that we want to recommend about that going forward to the board with upcoming FDPs coming. I said that right?
Can I give an update of how that transpired? So at the last meeting you had, you came up with some recommendations. Unfortunately, were those formalized in a vote, Trish, or did they still need to be formalized? Somehow they did not make it to the board as official recommendations.
They still do need to be formalized because our meeting had ended and we didn't have a quorum to vote.
Okay. Well, what I did was articulate them as the output of this committee, and as I recall, there were several. One is you wanted the south edge of the creek to be available for public use, that you wanted a trail on the south edge of the creek to demarcate the creek from the playing field, that a synthetic playing field was not copacetic with the creek corridor, and there were a couple of others. I read them right off your list. And I would say I had minimal success. I would recommend that as you come up with your ideas, that you always have somebody in attendance at those meetings to articulate for the committee. I think I did a plenty good job of it, but it matters if the committee is in attendance at those things.
Yes, I was able to make the
next
following one, and I did read them for the committee to know. I did read our recommendations to the board during the public comment period.
So I would encourage the committee to keep working this, if you feel strongly about it, and to maybe come up with some creative solutions as how a nice middle ground can be accomplished to where both objectives are met, to where there is green space for playing field and there is enjoyment along the creek corridor. So I think you need to put some more work, brain power into it, and I certainly can offer some suggestions if you're interested.
What was the feedback that you received?
I actually think the vote was pretty much split. There is a portion of the board that feels that this field should be the maximum size of possible field should be put on this. And right now that's measured at 400 feet long. So it's 1 1/3 football fields, and that is largely to accommodate rugby. And I think the town needs to come up with whether or not is a football-sized field enough, or do we really need to maximize it to accommodate rugby? Of course, if you do a football-sized field, which is 300 feet, it narrows, and that's what you are worried about, is how wide it is, because it impinges. But, you know, that argument's got to be bought by a majority of the board. I personally don't think there's necessarily a real understanding of how close certain edges come to the creek.
Sandy, when you guys did the walk roughly a month ago, right?
Right.
Were you able to see, like, I thought it was going to be marked out by the contractor at that point. Was it marked out? Could you see how close that field was really going to
Yes, but people had different takeaways based on probably their preconceptions before they went. What was very close to me was not very close to somebody who really supports a maximum size playing field. And in the current plan, on that south edge, there is not even a trail that veers to the right along the southern border of Coal Creek. At this point, in the plan we saw, it was just green grass going pretty much up to, well, all the way up to the buffer. Right. So if somebody wanted to informally, walk that, you'd have to make your own path, right? You'd have to walk on the grass, or you'd have to walk on the edge of the buffer or something like that. And I think that needs to be discussed.
Because I think you'll end up with social paths regardless.
You're going to end up with social paths. Also, no programming decisions have been made for this park yet. We haven't said definitively we're going to play rugby there, we're going to play youth football, or we're going to play 2 soccer games at a time, the Withway. So the debate really is that trail of demarcation and amenities at Creekside. What does your committee want to see at Creekside? Do you want some picnic tables at Creek, so people can sit at that creek area? And then, of course, if you have those, how do you get to those picnic tables? If there's no path to them, sort of becomes a decision of why have them there. Something that emerged in a background conversation on all this was, we haven't discussed for a long time the Coal Creek corridor to the left of Marshall Road. Marshall Road comes over Coal Creek and it bifurcates it, right? So you have the part to the right where there's going to be that expanse of grass with to be determined playing field or whatever. But to the left is an expanse of Coal Creek that is in the plan as naturalized. And the question is, can that part of Coal Creek be the part for the enjoyment of the community who is not necessarily sports-oriented, or, in other words, can you have the sports orientation to the right and the enjoyment of the creek more passive to the left by simply repurposing that naturalized, you could have some natural there, of course, but also have some grass closer to the buffer zone so people could relax and enjoy the creek there. And I'd have to walk it again to know what those distances and whatnot are like, but I thought that was actually an interesting comment that came up. So that might be some sort of compromise solution too. And then if you're left without a path at all on the south side, is that path on the north side adequate? I mean, have you given that enough of a look-see to, is that adequate? Is there any seating there, benches, picnic table, or anything on the north side to really then maximize that as the enjoyment zone, that kind of thing? So, just some ideas.
So in our April meeting, we had discussed and recommended that possibly paths would be on both sides, the north and the south, when we went out. OSAC went out and walked that creek corridor on March 17th. So that's when we saw it, and we had our ecology, I'm blanking on his name, the liaison, Clint.
Yeah.
And had discussed that corner really was where those Preble mouses sort of would habitat, like right there. That's why some of our recommendations about how close that corner comes is that he felt that vegetation there really was where it would impinge on them.
Which corner is that? Right there at Marshall and the left half?
Can we pull the map?
Oh,
The
right
southwest.
where the field is?
Yeah, right where the field is.
When we had discussed that, yes. so as we pull up.
I don't think he made that clear on the tour with the trustees, a month later or so.
Am I misremembering that, or that was my...
No, it was that southwest corner where the field is going to abut the creek, where there was by far the most evidence of the field mouse activity.
That needs to be communicated to the board, and he can draw that out for us over that, just like Tracy did there.
And I don't know that it's even abutting the creek, because it looks like it's going to be filled and will be taken over that whole habitat area, the way it's currently planned anyway, to be 400 feet.
So I think one of the motions we probably need to make tonight is to reduce the field size to a football-sized field, hopefully narrowing it sufficiently and pulling it back towards town center so that we can avoid impinging on the habitat for the mice, so. I don't know if
How
anyone-
wide is a football field?
A football field,
100 yards.
it's 100 yards
Wide.
long, and then...
Sean, could you Google that?
So, to your point, Sharon, we had recommended that the concept should be based on the creek corridor and habitat, or this is what we discussed in April, and not based on field design, but do we want to be more forceful than that and say we recommend a football-size field?
I think I'm hearing
A football-size field, width-wise, is 160 feet, and then length is 120 yards if you include the end zone.
And how does that compare to the rugby field, which is 400 by X?
Right.
420 times 360.
400 by 210 right now on the
So
map.
you said 160, so that saves 50 feet in width, because the width's not affected by end zones or anything.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm hearing we need to convey our rationale more clearly, the mouse habitat, the buffer, keeping people out of the creek. Not just we want to reduce the size, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think we need to also convey that they need to talk to Clint, because the information that we got from him sort of directed us somewhat towards that as well, and to verify that that information is correct.
And we should probably attach Tracy's map as an exhibit, or a copy of it as an exhibit. I don't know if you might be able to scan that and send it.
Or have
Actually, just sort of
Clint
shows.
produce it.
Or have Clint,
Yeah.
yeah, actually maybe have.
So we can at least show their
Have a
concern.
great one.
So I remember we had discussed
Just
this.
to make it clear to the board, yeah.
Well, the reason why we had pushed to make sure the board went on the south side was because of this specific concern, because we had seen that and we noted that, and it hadn't been brought up yet. Just a shame that that wasn't conveyed while you were
Well,
there.
to be fair, there were a couple of clusters of people, may have been conveyed in a group that I was not in. I'm a little confused here. If, in fact, a football field, sports field can impinge on this Cleveland mouse habitat, why is it we can't build things along the creek for the kids to enjoy directly, the creek?
Right.
I don't get it.
From Clint, I thought it was something like you're not supposed to invite anything in.
But you-
And so
but you
these
are.
grown, I know, you totally are. I don't understand it. But
Yeah.
of course, I'm not sure that this was really his decision either. We discussed it with him, and, he just educated us on how the way it is right now, it would be filled into the habitat.
And I'm not sure what the vision of this group, I'm not sure that represents what the vision of this group was. I think when we got out there
Yeah.
and saw it, we had pretty much said, this isn't necessarily a good idea now that we see this. So the fact that that is filled in with manicured stuff for kids and family to play isn't necessarily what we think would be the best idea at this point.
And unfortunately, there looks like there's ample space on the other park area. What is that? Is that Park 1 or? But that's all terraced, and the lay of the land, I don't think that they wanted to change that in order to make it flat. Is that right?
Right.
I do have one thing to add. Clint, who you are referring to, is Clint Hankey, a biologist with ERO Resources Corporation. And staff has been in touch with him, and one of the things he remarked about was that noxious weeds and trash was, could be removed from that area if the group was interested in, cleaning up trash and removing noxious weeds. I don't know how the timeline of that would go, but that's an option that the biologist gave.
Are there noxious weeds and trash in it now?
Yes.
So that would be a separate project he's recommending, separate from what we're discussing now, though. Yep, okay. But I think one of the things we had talked about at the April meeting was not so much to have the boundaries of the field present as it was, let's look at what the boundaries of protection should be. And then maybe it would be warranted to have the board and members of this committee walk it and actually see where they overlap and how significant that overlap is. And therefore, mark where the protected area and ask Clint to mark, where is the habitat? And actually physically see, is that a 5-foot overlay, is that a 15-foot or a 50-foot overlay? Because I think that would really impact, hopefully, the board members who don't realize that, hey, you really are encroaching on this habitat, and which way do you want to go?
Sandy, where does it stand right now going forward?
It's up to the developer. The board has passed basically its has moved forward to the developer our viewpoints on what should, the town ultimately, according to all the documents, has design responsibility for these parks. And the developer has execution responsibilities. So we passed on to him our hot buttons, and then he will, on his schedule, come back to us with a final development plan. When that final development plan is received by staff, OSAC will have an opportunity to look at it, and POSTAC will have an opportunity to look at it and comment before the board's decision on it. So this is good preliminary discussion to get your thoughts honed on what your ultimate recommendation at that time will be. And it certainly doesn't, I would not put it off. I expect to have those in sometime yet this year.
And I've found in the past, those FDPs get pushed with deadlines, whether they're arbitrary or not. They get driven, and it's really hard if it's already gotten to the point where the developer has it on an FDP. So to the extent that we could drive ahead of the final plan being posed.
To influence what he puts in the FDP?
Right, I think is important.
So should our first recommendation be then not necessarily about the FDP, but about Clint giving a more educational...
Well, he just asked for clarifying language, that it's this committee's understanding that in fact that field impinges. And is that a correct, that a field of these dimensions is 210 by 400, that impinges on what he's identified as the Preble mouse habitat. That needs, yes or no, right? And how many feet does it impinge?
So Allison, does that something that we have to ask the board before we can go to Clint, or is that something that staff can go and ask Clint to comment on?
I think I can ask Clint and give you the information.
Okay.
And possibly have him flag it and then set up a time to walk the property.
Right.
Allison, can you put up our other recommendations from the April notes? Just,
Sean, you've got light duty over there. I think it's the leftmost light switch behind you. Maybe. There.
Which one would you like to see, school parcel or STC?
Note the STC.
Number 2 down below.
Number 2. Right there.
So Sandy, were you saying this didn't make it in front of the board?
It
or-
did, because I put it there.
Okay.
And the concern about bullet point 1, like I said, it's split about 50-50, and one gentleman was not there, so you had 3 and 3 really at this meeting. The delineation in bullet 1 concerns the supporters of the largest field possible, because of course it's a hard demarcation, right? Preferably that would be concrete. So the field can't go past it. So that's obvious why that creates, some conflict on the board. Bullet 2, I think, is well stated and stands by itself. Number 3, obvious reasons, already expressed. Recommends trails on both sides of creek corridor. Again, that, if you want the maximum size field, trail would go south of the buffer. You have the creek, riparian, the buffer, then the trail, right?
Yep. And I think it makes sense to maybe expand that one to just say that the concern would be if we don't do something proper, that you're going to end up with social trails, and social trails may impinge on habitat because they're not demarcated, or they're not marked.
And I also think this is where it goes to your point that I don't think we were aware that we could come over on the north side of the creek for parts, what you mentioned earlier about maybe having benches or things on the north side of the creek. I don't think that option was clear to us when we were out walking it beyond the current trail that is there.
Oh, really?
Well, I think it's because if you go out there and look at it, the trail pretty much abuts right up to the habitat area. And I thought it was our understanding that trail is going to stay as is.
Right. I would bet it is going to stay as is because it was rebuilt. And you're saying there's no room in there to put a...
Not to the south of that
Yeah.
trail, and I don't know that we were clear on what was north of that trail, if that was...
Wasn't that park number 2 that's going to...
No, well, north of that trail is going to be the hotel complex.
Hotel
and the
Yeah, we
complex,
corner.
weren't
right.
clear on what was...
Yeah,
So I
well,
don't
and
know
those may
that...
be limitations.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's
There's-
anything south of the trail, and I'm not sure what's available
Yeah.
land-wise.
There certainly wasn't much room for any additional development between
Well, I
what the
think
creek is and where that path
needs
is.
to be spelled out. And because if it's just not possible there, the question then comes down to, should there be a resting area and lounging, if you will, enjoyment area around the creek? And if it can't be on one side, it either must be on the other side or it's not there at all, right?
And I think that is part of our other bullet point of, having the enjoyment for folks, that we would want some benches or places that people could sit.
Yeah, you didn't articulate benches and picnic tables and stuff. That might be worth articulating. And then the lighting study, I don't know that made it into people's consciousness. I said it, but it sort of fell by the wayside, so that can certainly be reinforced.
What about the turf? Did they make comments on that?
I suspect that's going to be possibly coming back up in the FDP. It's not really being actively fought for in the meetings that we had, but those of us who are unequivocally against it have said we are unequivocally against artificial turf of any kind, even the new kind, which is part artificial and part not, part real, part artificial. It's some sort of hybrid thing. So certainly I have, and I know one other trustee, or maybe two other trustees, have said they're absolutely against it. That's a minority. Three's a minority on a 7-person board.
So do we need to, or can we ask staff to do the lighting study? Does that have to go to the Board of Trustees? Because I think at one point, 6 months or a year ago, we asked that we would have the right to ask for particular studies and paper and research that are required and necessary for our information to make proper decisions.
I don't think staff can actually do the lighting study. I don't know that they have the capability, but...
Not that they could do it, but that they could hire a consultant to do it.
So I would just ask Allison to follow up on that. How would that...
Is it possible that that might be something that Clint has enough knowledge of with the local wildlife that he'd be able to make a statement about it?
I'm really unknowledgeable on
Or even Ashley.
lighting things.
I can follow up on that.
Do we want to take time to tweak this now? Your first statement was that we never voted on it, and it was mentioned in your meeting, but it wasn't official. It seems important. Do we want to
Yes,
take
no,
time to do that?
I think we want to vote on it or tweak it and then vote on it.
I think it'll be fine to do it at next month's meeting if you want to spend, some time tweaking it. And that tweaking action, as I understand, can happen over the internet. It's then has to come back for a vote.
That's correct.
Okay.
So do we want to do that? We can wordsmith it offline, with the exception of that we are, Allison, you are going to follow up with Clint and Ashley, Clint on the, information he gave to us on the 17th, and then with Ashley and Tim on the lighting, if they can be a resource.
Yes.
When we go back and tweak it as we're talking about, for example, the fourth bullet, recommend trails on both sides of Creek Corridor. We should think about why. Why is that convincing from our perspective?
And I think part of that is the access to the creek from the recreational side, from town center. That's where you're going to have the majority of, moms and families, parents on the weekends, sort of quiet enjoyment of the creek side, possibly picnicking, all of those uses. If they have to actually walk all the way out around and get to the north side, are they going to use it? I think they're actually going to use it either way, and it's going to create social trails, unless a field stops them from doing that because it's articulated, so.
And then the point that was made, if you cannot put benches and places to sit on the north, this is the only place they could go on the south. So
That's a good point.
if they are there, then a trail, it's wise to have a trail lead to them.
Great, then moving on to agenda item number 5, the 5-year Trails Plan. We have a paper copy, and then Allison, I don't know if you were able to end up opening it up online. No, okay, so in front of you for the paper copy, you have what our recommendations were in 2014, and then we have committee members' recommendations and rankings next to them. I think one thing to remember as we come up with a whole, our solid group recommendations is one of the points that Sharon made over email is that some of it's also, can this reasonably be done in the year that we're going to market to?
And Allison, do we have that map that shows where these trails actually are? I think they were color-coded at one point. And then that way we could look to see whether or not there's parcels that have to be acquired before you could actually have the trail. And if that's the case, you may as well put them as a low priority or in an out year, because it physically can't happen in 15 or 16 probably.
And Allison, do you know, are any of the 2015 in play right now? Like the number one, are any of them currently being worked with the town?
I'm not sure at this moment which ones, but I can follow up on that.
Yeah, I know that the 2014 projects got waylaid because of the flood issues, which may have impacted 2015 too, and I don't know what the budget allowed for, and whether Youth Corps is going to maybe work on these this summer. I think the one that is in our agenda for the year, our working plan, is the Hodgkin Harris, and trying to do something, since this is the year the water's now back, the wildlife is starting to come back. We saw for the first time the muskrat came back, which was really nice, and this evening pulling out 4 or 5 of the white pelicans had landed, and we've got 11 baby ducks. Not that the Audubon Society wants to see the ducks there, but it's nice to see the reservoir semi-full and starting to become active again with the wildlife. So now's a good opportunity to try to decide whether or not there'll be some sort of a soft trail there or viewing deck, and that was what was anticipated back in 14 when we thought the dam might be finished last fall.
So how do you want to go through all of these, Trish, to come up with an OSAC?
I think we should start out with, Sharon, you had mentioned in the email that you sent to everybody, that when I was going through this, I was under the premise that we were prioritizing based on what we felt was important to us, regardless of the year that it was currently set at, et cetera. But maybe you want to give a little more background as to, again, it was because, things are not bought yet. Obviously, you can't build a trail on it. But my question is, we have a 2014 and a 2015 plan already in place. Do we even bother prioritizing those two things? Because those are hypothetically already been prioritized as things that need to be done now. So maybe we should just look toward 2016 and beyond in terms of prioritization, and then kind of level set based on that, regardless of what we are already put in for input. I don't think it's what we have now, based on what you've said and what has already been determined for 2014, 2015. I think there's all null and void almost at this point to bother spending time.
Yeah, and I think some of them also require IGAs with the county, right? Which the county right now, because of all the flood work and rework of trails there, I'm not sure. Margaret was the one that was a great resource in terms of whether or not there was any budget to do any joint projects. I don't think there is until out years, so some of the ones that require IGAs with the county can probably be pushed back, but we'd have to look to the county. That doesn't mean that you can't prioritize them and push for them, because certainly the sooner we do that, the better, so that when money freely flows again. But I think right now, pulling anything with an IGA into 15 or even 16 is going to be tough.
So should we look at cost first? I guess we need to look at each column, how we want to look at it from a cost perspective, a realistic perspective. I don't know. There's different ways to filter all this information in a realistic way. So I don't know. And then also, do we want to focus on the trails on the west side and then move our way east, or north to south, or just randomly?
Can I comment on what you were saying about 2014 and 2015 trails? I hear what you're saying, that they've already been set as a priority, but we may not, as a new committee, see them as a priority. And since they've not been done, because I don't think any of those on here have been completed, that maybe we might reprioritize them. I know that makes more work for us, but just a thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. When do you have to submit this, Allison?
This is an internal working document for the town, so there is no specific deadline.
Because the only reason I'm asking is if there were time. Martin had the gentleman, and I don't think he's employed by the town any longer, so I don't know who his replacement was, came and met with us and walked us through. It was the gentleman that actually put this map together with all the potential trails, and he was able to walk through what was required, and he told the committee, whether or not there was property that needed to be acquired before a trail could be built. Like, I'm not sure that we have the information we actually need for you guys to make educated decisions around the IGAs, which trails are over property that would need to be acquired, that type of information. So I don't know whether, Allison, it might be worth trying to find out who that person is. Martin would be able to help you with that, and actually have them participate in the discussion and educate the committee.
Just as a question, was that in 2014 when this original ranking was done?
I think it was in 2013, and we spent...
You think what's his name, Alan McBeth?
Yes,
Yeah.
Alan. Were you just on the committee or new to the committee?
No, I did not attend a meeting where this was, so it had to have been before July of 2013.
Okay. And I think we spent several sessions on it, and it's probably worth having Martin or Alan's replacement come and spend some time with the committee, because it is a new committee as well, especially with my stepping off. Certainly happy to come back and help the discussion as a public participant if I can. But I think more education really needs to be given around these trails and what the history is behind it for you guys to make a good decision. And as you say, it's sort of, you can come at it from multiple ways, and you guys could spend a lot of time debating without the background.
Plus, there's also ProStack's recommendation. How do we factor that into what we're providing? Gets a little complicated.
I don't think you have to, at all.
Too soon.
I think you do your business and they do their business. I have recommended that it would be nice if then the two of you, two committees or their select representatives can meet and set a joint priority, because then the board doesn't have to play mediator, play King Solomon on that decision. But I think their desires are theirs and your desires are yours.
So what's the urgency on putting together a plan? I mean, we're looking at 2014 trails. I would think that at some point it needs to be raised up in priority, because I'm assuming trails are going to start being repaired or maintained or rebuilt or built new.
So do you have your recommendations already into BOCO on the BOCO trails
Those
plan?
go in for August,
Okay.
so we'll talk about them June or July.
So to the extent any of these are BOCO, they take a different priority, right, if you want to put them in that plan. To the extent these are to the board for interior in the town, it's really,
I think we aligned them for budgeting, because you're
Yeah.
starting to formulate the 2016.
is there, have any of them been budgeted?
So that would be a question. I guess I had assumed that the 2014 were budgeted in the 2014 budget, but they got pushed because of the flood. And then 2015, I don't know what the allocated budget is, and whether or not, what we need to do is collapse those into 2015, see which ones are viable for the budget based on whatever budget was granted last July, and then see what would fit, because that gives you the first clue. Can we fit it in the budgeted number? And you might have to manipulate which ones, you do one big project or three multiple small projects.
And we don't know if the town's actively working any of them on the list.
Right.
I mean, per how they're,
Yeah. So I think that's a question to you, Allison, is there budget allocated to trails for 2015, which I'm assuming that there is, and then a question of whether or not staff has actually begun to do any planning toward summer or fall development of those trails, because if those are already in the works, clearly those go to the top, and then we start to look at what the 2016 budget looks like, and then what you can allocate there, and then everything else is a wish list that you can push out.
So Allison, if you can find those two and then talk to Martin, see if we can have a speaker come to either the June meeting or the July meeting to educate us on the rest of it.
And
I think
probably
then we
the
can come up
June,
with a good plan.
yeah, and I would think the June meeting would be great, because July, I think you start the budget process in July, don't you, Sandy?
Yes, we start very early.
So if we could get a resource to come to the June meeting, and then we can allocate sufficient time to look at that.
Well, just looking at this, there seems to be quite a discrepancy, if you will, disparity between what the priorities were and what members of this committee feel they should be.
And I think that is definitely a function of us just not having all of the information of why these were ranked the way they were. I think after that presentation, we will likely probably get a little bit closer.
Well, and most of these really are sort of pro-stack trails, you know, the ones that occur in town, whatnot. So that's probably, they have that knowledge.
Patricia, you might want to even, I don't know whether it makes sense to invite the chair of ProStack to come and give their
Yeah.
background as well.
Just a brief comment about a large majority of these trails maybe being pro-stacks is last year, OSAC voted to go with pro-stacks recommendation, and so that was what happened with the process last year.
Right, because you're way down on number 6 in 2016. Well, number 4, possibly, install soft trail parallel to McCaslin from water treatment plant to High Plains Drive, so that's on the west side of McCaslin.
And I think that's more feasible now that we have the Shan property.
Right, so, you know, that certainly has OSAC overtones, because you're on the west side of McCaslin there, bordering open space, et cetera. And then you go to number 6, Colton Trail ahead to 128.
And I want to think that we might have to do an acquisition to do that.
Huh?
I think we have to acquire property,
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
that's why that's in an out year, if I recall correctly.
I'd also like to formally recommend that we have connector trails from the Shan Trailhead property to one or multiple of these other trails. There's nothing listed on this entire sheet having to do with Shan, and if it is going to be a trailhead, we obviously need to add.
Well,
formally add.
you have to, because we just acquired Shan, that's a whole new discussion, so, and that's totally OSAC with that
Yep.
one.
And I think it becomes a great trailhead, which would be great. The other one I'd probably talk to see if we couldn't pull in, as I said, is something so that you get some advantage of all the resources and money that would put into the reservoir, is to put some kind of viewing deck and access, and we will have to work with the county on that, but I do think that one would be a priority only because right now it's in the forefront.
You know, one trail that seems to be on the agendas for the last couple, and then it's also on your joint meeting agenda with Louisville, is the Davidson Mesa underpass. It keeps coming up, and I don't think we've pulled together our opinion on that one yet.
As well as, that underpass thing will probably be discussed on a board level, whether or not the actual underpass, the trails under the underpass happen. But you heard from Louisville Open Space that they actually want another trail that comes and joins further in. That I don't think is anywhere.
No, that would
I think
be
that's a
new
brand
as
new
well,
idea,
because
right?
It's new since.
Right, so, and we're having that thing, as I told Matt, on Friday, the joint meeting with them.
That may be item number 15, maybe 2018, is that what? For $126,000.
The one that Louisville mentioned?
Yeah, I was
I thought
talking
that was
something-
further west, because this one butts right up against the property, number 15.
Yeah, I think that's the one I'm talking about.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think that's the one we're going to discuss Friday.
Okay.
So I will say that during Arbor Day, I did have, a town citizen come up, and that was one of they want connections out to Davidson Mesa. They want connections out to the Boulder County trails. So that was something that was brought up on Arbor Day as well.
The bikeway to Boulder is on Louisville side. So how do you get to it if you're on the Superior side?
Yeah, and then part of it is your grant, the grant that Allison, that you applied for, does some of the trail up Marshall, correct? But it doesn't connect all the way to that punch-through underneath.
Well, my understanding is that the bikeway, I think, misses the golf course in Louisville and comes over to our side along the Coal Creek Trail, in which we've gotten the funding through Dr. Cog to go from Coal Creek Trail to under McCaslin and to the Park and Ride, which will be the bus rapid transit station, and then there will be a trail from there up Marshall to that area that Louisville is interested in for the underpass.
And will that connect then to get you back under the underpass to the trail up to Boulder?
I think
Is that your
that's
understanding?
part of it, and also perhaps a way into El Dorado Canyon via some of the trails on our side of US 36 as well.
Yeah, that was to facilitate, you mean, but that's more Louisville coming through it to take advantage of our trails to get over to El Dorado Canyon, right?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, we've got to clarify all this, but that additional trail that was mentioned in your joint open space thing is different. It's not that. And that was articulated to the board at a recent meeting, so I imagine that's going to come up on Friday. I think the issue over the underpass is not whether or not that's happening, it's whether or not the town of Superior helps pay for it, or if it's all a Louisville expense. So they're trying to get us to throw in several $100,000 towards the payment of it.
They always like us to.
And we're saying, well, if you're building it anyway, why?
And we know from our joint meeting with them too, is that, for us to also, when we recommend to Boulder County, that we're all sort of pushing that area as trails that we would like Boulder County to help facilitate.
Right.
So Allison, if you can work on getting that for the June meeting, that would be great, and then we can move on to stay on our agenda to discussion item number 6, the review of the open space funding budget and parameters. And there was a document that Allison put out for us, I believe, right? This was one of them.
I can give the current information
Okay.
that I have. The starting balance for 2014, including remaining bond proceeds and sales and use tax revenues, was $5.36 million. Expenditures totaled $1,315,000, and revenues totaled $530,000 in 2014. The year-end balance was $4,575,000. The budgeted year-end projection for this fund in 2015, after projected expenses of $55,000 and revenues of $435,000, is $4,955,000 in the absence of significant expenditures.
And the 1.315 in expenses this year, that was Shan and payment for our share of Hodgkin Harris.
That's what I understand.
Okay.
And is at the end of 2015, is that end of calendar year or fiscal, is that a fiscal year?
Fiscal.
Fiscal year.
Okay.
If you look at the resolution R13 Series 2004, which contains the budget parameters for the open space sales tax revenues, and you look down at section number 1, it has the priorities there, which may help on some of your discussions for different projects you're thinking about working on.
I'm going to really stick my neck out here because we discussed this quite a bit at the last board retreat. Who was there? A couple POSTAC people sat through the whole meeting. The document you don't have, I think, is as important as the document you do have. In a time period preceding the adoption of this resolution by the then board, and it was adopted February 9, 2004. A referendum was put in front of the residents of Superior asking for imposition of a sales tax amount for certain purposes, right? And that passed. And that language you must have in conjunction with this document. That language, which is what every resident read and understood before they voted, or they should have read it and understood it before they voted yes or no to impose on themselves the sales tax amount, said what and how it would be used, right? And it was actually quite broad in what this sales tax could be used for. Subsequently, I think it was about a year later or something, the board then in power took the liberty of actually putting their own take on what it could be used for. Now, that doesn't set well with me, and that's why I'm sticking my neck out. If I as a voter vote, understanding what the language of the referendum say, I think it is a little bit troubling, a lot troubling, to then have your elected leaders take your vote and, in this case, narrow it in substantially as to what they think the priorities should be. Now, so this is a discussion we had. On the fourth whereas, it says whereas the board that board in 2004 does not intend that the categorization of an item as high, medium, or low does not prevent the town from expending a portion of the sales tax revenue for a medium or low priority item prior to all high priority items being completed, if there's an opportunity for the town to meet overall open space objectives by such expenditure. Well, to the unknowing eye, you think, well, it doesn't limit you, you can really go and do it anyway, but what they left out of that whereas is all those items they gave no priority. And so if you turn to M&N, that fourth whereas, to me, excludes those things that they sort of unilaterally, after the town referendum, that board decided those should have no priority, and those priorities were allowed in the referendum language. So this is not the way I do governance, so that's the open disclosure there. You know, if the town has voted for something, I think you've got to take the literal word that the town voted for, and in good faith, try to enforce that and live with that. So that's why you need to have the referendum language and thoroughly read it and understand what the residents of this community passed. And read this very carefully, because that fourth whereas, in a quick reading, you wouldn't catch that it excludes all no priority items that that particular board had, they gave them no priority. I would, in reading this, I would ask you to look at item L. You have made your OSAC committee has given a high priority to education programs, and they give it a low priority. Look at K, costs associated with developed open space, trails, and trailheads is a low priority. That's not, I think, in keeping with what I've been hearing from your committee for a while. So I think it's safe to say that this resolution is going to be revisited by this current board against the original language, and it's possible that this may come up for some reconsideration at a board level.
So would you be looking for the committee to review these and reprioritize them?
I think you can ask for the language of the official referendum, so you're fully educated. And with that, the vote by which it passed, the actual raw numbers on that vote. And read it very carefully against this.
Trustee Penny, is this the correct ballot language that you were referring to?
Yeah, when was that vote taken?
So it says the election was November 6, 2001, so
Okay.
that's the vote
yeah,
that passed
that's right.
this. So,
And we don't have to...
Can you email that, Allison, to everyone?
Yeah. And so, look at that vote. Okay, so it was not... Am I looking at 2A? I'm half blind when I'm looking at this stuff that small. Allison, which one am I looking at, 2A?
Yes.
So what I always do is I look at the vote. Was it an overwhelming yes or an overwhelming no, right? So this one was pretty split, right? It varied
it was
by
like 50.
98 votes, right? Separated out of a turnout of about 2,000. But I think at your leisure, you should read that. That's the language you as a voter had in front of you and thought you were voting on, right? And then read it very carefully against this language. And I've read these documents probably 6 or 8 times since I've been on the board. So it really does take a close read. I believe the ballot issue language as passed by the residents of this community, as represented by those 2,000 who voted, it supersedes anything. But we'll have to, I'm just telling you my personal viewpoint, that that's what the residents said they wanted.
So Allison, if you can email that to us, and then if folks can take this, and if you can also email this document out to the group too for the members who aren't here tonight, and we can read both of those in prep of our June meeting. If we ended up on our June agenda, or if we ended up on our July agenda.
And then do you plan for us to make a recommendation to the board regarding this?
Yes, because it sounds like it came up in the board's retreat, so I do think it's something, looking at this, if it was 2004 and that was 2001, there was a lot more open space property to acquire. We are, limited that list now down to about 4 properties that are left, 4 or 5 that are left. So I think that the priorities have changed a bit, and I do think, to Sandy's point, that we should understand what this board in 2004, what the voters voted for, what the board put in as the resolution for 2004, and what we would recommend as a board going forward.
Right. Of particular interest, I think, to this group, because you have been somewhat trail-focused for a while now, is to what extent do you believe open space money should be used for trails, whether or not they occur on Town of Superior property? Do you want to, with open space money, encourage the development of those trails and those connections that you want to see? Or do, which certainly can be achieved quicker with a pot of money, right? Then they can be achieved from the general fund of the Town of Superior, which is a much slower process. We've got to find that 100,000 or that 200,000. So that seems to be one area that seems to be, there seems to be a priority on this group of trails. So, if you think of it holistically versus your chunk and ProStack's chunk, and think about what it is you really want to accomplish for this town.
So that's a good clarification. So what you're suggesting is, when we're prioritizing to the schedule we looked at earlier, that's really general funds. A portion of it is coming from OSAC, as delineated in the spreadsheet, but we could accelerate one or two of those projects should it be important enough, but we would have to use the OSAC funds and justify them based on the referendum.
Right.
Yes.
And from a board perspective, we're almost bought out on open space monies, open space lands, right? We've got one huge priority, right? But this .3 sales tax does not, it does not end. It goes on and on and on. So roughly, Allison just told you, depending on the year, the town collected $530,000 in 2013, it looks like, in sales tax, and $435,000 in 2014. So it's a chunk. It's about $500,000 a year comes in through that sales tax. And should the board vote to end that at some point in time? Or should it continue to be collected, and then if so, and there are no big open space priorities, how should that be repurposed?
I think that you sort of go into, just as the town is maturing, right, you sort of have to go into a maintenance and operations mode and sort of repair, restore the education process, which was my big mantra for the couple of years I've been on the committee, to utilize the funds so that you're giving back to the community. It shouldn't just be stored up and not spent or what have you. But I think you're right. I mean, as, what if and when Level 3 ever becomes a possibility or is a Harius, you want to have enough that you could have a meaningful input into an IGA with the county or what have you, or the developer to preserve portions of those properties as they develop. But I think that I'd hate to see you end the tax, because getting the tax back is probably unlikely.
Well, and I also think that the community members enjoy our open space. It's something, it's a resource that our town enjoys, and I think we would want to maintain it. And so I think we would want to keep that sales tax for that same reason. But I think you're right, like it is going to move off of acquiring to maintaining or improving.
I was going to say enhancing.
Enhancing some of them. For example, some of our very preliminary brainstorming about Shan Shan is, should that be a whole new trailhead? And that would obviously cost a significant amount of money to make that a trailhead and not just have it be off the side of the road that you go through.
Yeah, I think those are things that you probably needs to start putting on paper. Level 3, may never take place as well.
Yes.
Well, I think, this is just my feeling, even if we can't ever actually acquire Level 3, is there a way to ask the developer through some form of funding to accommodate some of the needs that we want? Because it's really not buildable land, 2/3 of that property, right? The steepness, it's not. Right. So, we might be able to work with a developer. It doesn't always have to necessarily be an acquisition. It could be some sort of an easement or what have you that gives us and meets the broader purpose, which is to protect it from development or whatnot. So I think that's where we want, and probably to your point on the retreat, is how broad can we read 2A versus how they've written it in the schedule resolution R13. Is that too limiting if we wanted to do something like work with a developer to protect a certain portion of developed land?
Great, just to be conscious of time and our agenda, I think if you can get us those items, Allison, then we can move on to discussion point number 7, which is the proposed 2016 budget.
I have a couple of quick remarks for this. First of all, part of the 5 years Trails Plan prioritization will feed into the budget, like was pointed out. And that process, the budget process, is starting to begin for the town. So that's one of the reasons it's important to try to get the 5-year Trails Plan finalized. And further, a couple things to think about. Is there anything that the committee would like to change from last year regarding the budget, such as outdoor education, National Trails Day, and outdoor education would tie into our contractor, Ashley, for our wildlife ecology.
And I think in prior years, you actually needed a motion from us that we wanted to set aside the $10,000 or ask for the $10,000 in the budget. And we should also consider whether that's a reasonable amount based on what the spending's been to date for those 3 items. But I think probably in June or July, you'll need to actually make a motion to preserve that budget for the same if you're going to have those events going forward.
So I have to say, I like the education events, and I've been to a couple, and I think that they're very worthwhile, and I think the town citizens who have done that have enjoyed them as well. I think the feedback has, been great on them. So I personally would like to see those continue. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor of our group to support that education.
Do we have any solid numbers or way to track in a quantitative way the success of these? Like, do we know we've had an average of 20 people or?
I've been conducting surveys on all outdoor education programs for attendees to fill out and submit. I've been giving that feedback to our wildlife ecologist for improvement of her programs, and I'm also, now we've started conducting our registration for the outdoor education programs via the same website software as we use for our Parks and Rec programming as a better way to also track it. So I've initiated a couple of processes to do just that.
And then you have attendance. You have that documented at each event.
Yes. That registration also, prior to my adjustment of that, our contractor was collecting that information and sending it to us. And now, since we have registrants going through the website, it's also being able to be tracked through that software and being added to all of our programming.
So I would really recommend when you make a budget request that you have that documentation as part of that budget request, because a lot of times it's not there and it drives us nuts during budget process, because that's the first question you ask is how many people attend these.
Do we have that information at our disposal right now? Can we start to see that, and so we can tease out trends and see what has been successful?
Well, I have the information since we've started, but all of our programs, we're not at the end of the year, so we still have programming, a considerable amount of our programming left. Mm-hmm. And so
I would just break it out by program. because now we're into year 2 of some programs and others were year 1.
Yeah.
And just list the program and participants.
For the year 1 programs, we should at least have attendance data, right? So we can at least...
Or at least a number of people show up.
Exactly. I mean, if we don't have anything else, I think should
And it
hopefully...
might be useful to say number who registered and number who attended. Because attended sometimes is weather impacted. But registration shows interest, so you might do both.
But I know Jeff, and I can't remember the woman's name, in the park. I mean,
Jeff and Paige.
Jeff and Paige, I mean, there had to have been well over 100 there. I think we had about 100 people.
200 and some.
Oops, I'm not on. I think we had probably close to 100 or 110 to Trails Day last year. So I think we probably, to your point, even if we don't have factual, because you've only started, I think we could at least give estimates to the board to benefit the success of getting the budget pushed through.
We do have documentation and various notes for recaps of programming. They may not be as specific as breaking out the registration versus who actually attended, but definitely the recaps would help us to...
Yeah, so maybe for the next meeting, it would be worthwhile if we could just create a quick spreadsheet. Here's the programs we did in 2014, here's what we've done to date 2015, and here was the attendance.
So I do think in general, we do want to continue an education program, but I think it will be good to get those numbers maybe for next month so that we can say these are the ones we definitely want to continue. I know when we met with the Louisville board and we got updates on the programs they're doing, we might also want to look at expanding some of the things or changing them up.
Well, one of the things that they mentioned that was very surprising to me is how much of that was just free, because it was volunteer-based that they were giving that. So, I mean, I'm not sure how much we do right now. I know some of this stuff is, we're not paying somebody to go out there and do it, but that certainly seemed like a place for us to expand going forward. For another project at a later date.
Is there anything else on our planned budget we need to discuss? Aside from education, trails, maintenance, those 2 chunks, is there anything else?
I mean, I think the budget that we asked for is not, so we have our open space fund, which is for those things. I think the budget generally is around National Trails Day and education.
Okay.
Correct, and there's also the part of education for the committee and the COSA conference that we discussed earlier.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And on the COSA conference, I was just going to mention, there's some years that it's beneficial to go, and then there's years that aren't necessarily based on the agenda beneficial. So like last year, it was really centered on the rangers and safety and security, things that didn't impact this group. So we didn't send anyone. The year before I did go, because that's when we were focusing on education, and a lot of the seminars and workshops were focused on what the other counties have been doing, particularly Jefferson. Jefferson has done a lot in terms of building up their education programs and introducing young and old to programs on their open space. So that was a good year to go. So, you know, I think it's important when you make the decision to go or not go. I'd still put the budget there, so if it is a good program, because you never know the program until you're already in the budget year. So I definitely would fight for the budget and include it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you may or may not want to go in particular years.
And it should be clear that I think this money that we've asked for has covered an OSAC committee member as well as if a staff member wanted to go. So it was sponsoring, I guess, a staff member outside of general training funds that you might have for staff members, specifically for that education.
And also, I think the other thing it includes is budget for Ashley's time, which is critical, I think, for the education program to really be successful, because the committee members, you know, we do Trails Day pretty much within the group, but outside of that, Ashley's and Allison are critical to getting those underfoot, so.
And also, just to note, the training budget is separate from the 10,000. It's 2,500 historically.
For OSAC? Oh, good.
And I think when I went, it was in Crested Butte, and I think it was only $500 or $516. So, like, if you need to cut a budget item, there's
Except for
actually
mileage.
more than you need to cover that. I drove, yeah, you drive, and then, so it was really 2 nights hotel. They provide all the food as part of the thing, so I think it really was just mileage and hotel for the 2 evenings was all the cost. So that's a budget item that could be scaled back if you need to scale budget back.
So Allison, if you can pull those numbers for us. So, when does the budget go official, Sandy? Is that July that you guys, or?
No, we only approve it, we start it whenever they get it started, which is, seems like it's earlier every year, but July-ish, and then we approve it, I think, last meeting in November or something like that.
Okay. Great, just for timing. All right, great. So then our 8th agenda item is to finalize our National Trails Day event planning. We have a document on sort of our National Trails Day.
I wrote a little blurb to put on our website and to start marketing for the event. And one thing that I put in there was about the Hop Quest program beginning at 10 a.m. And so I was interested in kind of planning around the Hop Quest program. For example, the Educational Game and Crafts sponsored by the Youth Leadership Council. I thought it would be great for them to go immediately after the Hop Quest program, because the activity that they have planned is called Predator and Prey, and it's about the hierarchy of the animal kingdom, and it's kind of a game of tag for the children. And so right when because our main draw last year was Hop Quest program, all the children were there, then we'd have all those children that could transition into the Predator and Prey game. And I was just wondering about times for all the other activities so that I could go ahead and market it in the same way I've marketed the Hop Quest for the time, so people could show up, especially for the parts that they're interested in.
And I was looking for the times as well. I think you were looking at them, to give guidance to the folks that are willing to do it. But secondly, I wanted to put it on the brochure that we want to get out and start leaving behind too, and I've just been waiting for that. So maybe if we can just bullet the time, and then you could let folks know if people have priority, but be great to just pin these down.
So the wildlife booth is Ashley, is that
That's
correct?
correct, and I think she's also going to be doing the naturalist hike, and so that part can be flexible. I would, because she's going to be there for the event, we could pick a time for her to do that around some of the other activities. She's also going to have the brochures that the committee discussed regarding rattlesnakes, prairie dogs, I think coyotes, and maybe noxious weeds. And she's getting a brochure together to have at that wildlife booth and bring along the typical materials that she brings, to these events. And so I thought we could definitely be flexible with her because she's going to be there. So for her, 2 things, the wildlife booth and the naturalist hike, that can be worked around whatever your volunteer programs are thinking about.
So I definitely know from last year, I think we timed them closer together, and people were upset that they left and Hop Quest was going on. And they wanted to be there, but they also wanted to be on the hike. So I think that is something we want to time correctly, at least that part, because folks were like, oh, I wanted to see the hawks or not see them. For the Rocky Mountain Fire Rescue guys. Do they have a time of around when they want to come, Ken, or did they?
I told them that we would determine a time that we were going to try to slot them for, and I let them know after this meeting. So, right now, they said they are available during that day, and they're waiting for our guidance. So, I figured we'd kind of finalize that agenda today, so I could get back to them.
And is earlier maybe better than later in terms of if they have a rescue and they're more apt to be out on a rescue later, potentially? Last year, we didn't have that issue, and
Yes,
hopefully we won't.
I can ask him, but they haven't indicated one way or the other on that.
Okay.
I think the kids enjoyed so much being strapped to the board last year. So just trying to think if we could maybe have them do more of their thing before Hot Quest.
So
Then,
that's
and if they can
9:30.
hang around and answer questions for folks that have it, so do them more like 9:30.
Okay.
Then people can move to the, because we put out chairs for Hawk Quest, so you're going to be sitting because they let the hawks fly and get some meat and various things. So then move there, then move to the Pray, which was probably also another 20-minute, give or take, right, activity, I'm thinking. And then Ashley's hike could be after that.
So does Hot Quest take about a half hour usually?
It's about a half hour.
About a half hour to 40 minutes last year.
Yeah.
So we could do 10:45 for the educational games and crafts. Equestrian etiquette, do we at this point have, I know somebody who's going to coordinate a horse and rider.
So that's my question.
Yep.
What are the expectations for that?
So I think that we can ask them to speak, or we can just put out brochures as well. Like, I wasn't going to ask, I'm asking the running club and bike patrol more to just provide information, but not really give a formal agenda
Not a formal
time.
run or anything?
Yeah, they run on Saturdays, so I think we will just have that they're out there, maybe some of the runs that they do, as they sort of cycle through a set of runs every so many weeks. And the same thing for the biking. I'm asking more that if someone could even be out on the trail riding, because the Boulder Bike Patrol, that's what they do. They actually go out and ride and then just educate people as they encounter them. But I wasn't necessarily going to ask them to do an official time. The time goes quick. I mean, that's what I felt from last year.
Right.
Like, I don't know that we want every moment sort of scheduled, because it goes very quick. We have a lot of people that just sort of come through very quickly, like, because they're going out for a run or a walk or a bike, and
Who's guiding the naturalist hike? Is that being guided?
that's
Ashley.
That's Ashley.
Could she go out with the photographer and
who's-
have that be a combined event so that there's not too many events competing with each other?
I think that makes sense. Who is leading the photographer hike again? Who?
No, I can't remember his name, but someone in Superior who
Okay.
does photography on the side.
Do we want to do that early, like 8:30 or 9, in case it's a hot day, or later? I just know last year, we had people come out and they really wanted to do the photography hike, and that had kind of fallen apart. So I'd love to, if people come again, I really want it to be, that should be a structured time.
So I think we need to get from Ashley how long she plans to be out there. Is
She
it
was out for a
4
long time.
They were out there for a long time. I think some of it depends on the group that you get and the questions that they're asking.
We could talk to Ashley and recommend a certain span of time. It doesn't, she can be at booth, she can give a 20-minute hike. I mean, that's really up to you guys.
So I do like your idea that if they hike maybe either like 8:45 or right at 9 o'clock,
Yeah,
and
9
then they can come back off for Hawk Quest and move things through. And I think it is good to combine her with the photography, because then at least we have one person out there with them on the hike.
Does that mean we don't want to do Rocky Mountain Rescue at 9:30 then? Because you're taking a big population of who might want to be at the Rocky Mountain Rescue and putting them on a trail.
So could we do like 8:45 and ask her to be back for 9:30? And then they could do their part at 9:30, 10 o'clock,
That works for me.
We could even say 8:30
You want to
to
make
9:30.
an impact at 9.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
any event, you want an impact, you want people there at the starting time, right? You want bodies, because that makes other bodies stop. When cars pass, it's like, if it's a big crowd, they'll stop and say, what's going on?
So they'll definitely happen at 9:30 with Rocky Mountain Rescue, because
Right.
they'll have a bunch of their equipment out there, like last year.
It'll be
That'll
pulled
get
out.
it. I think the 8:45 hike might not draw that necessarily. They'll just look like a whole bunch of people out there hiking, so I don't think the start will be that start time will do it.
Could we do it at like 11:30 and then, so you'd have the youth leadership council, you think that's a half hour maybe, so then, or 11:15?
yeah.
So then if Ashley and the photographer take a long time, it doesn't matter because
If it's
it
a,
ends.
So we could do that, so we do it at the end of the day, do the hike at 11:15.
15 or,
Sharon has a good point, it's just hot.
yeah,
at that
I know what
point.
you're saying.
But
But it could be raining, we really do. I mean, it's, so I do have to say, I'm
makes to have them at the end when everybody's dispersing anyway, because they disperse doing their hike and photography, and others disperse and go home.
And then they have no rush. If they're enjoying it, they can keep it going. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
last week, yeah.
And then just have her manning her booth before that. I will have to say, I've seen 3 or 4 events show up on the Saturday, so I'm glad we moved to the Sunday. I think that was a good, good call, because I've already seen a bunch of events.
You might actually put search and rescue 9:15.
Yeah.
That kicks it off, it gets people there at your start time. If you're a little late, no harm, no foul, right?
Yep.
Or if it runs a little longer, then it doesn't run too much into Hawk Quest, that kind of thing. But that big old ladder truck out there and stuff like that, isn't that the ladder truck?
They bought, it's more like an ambulance, or
A van, utility type thing, yeah.
They're pulling out that rescue whatever they
Yeah,
call it.
their stretcher.
their stretcher, and like I said, the kids just thought that was fabulous to get strapped into the stretcher.
The big smile.
So,
Yeah.
to make sure I wrote this right, I think our optimal times we're looking at right now is Rocky Mountain Rescue at 9:15, Hawk West at 10, the Education and Games at 10:45, and then hike at 11:15? Did I get that right?
What do you think, Allison? Will they take a half hour or 45 minutes, the youth leadership?
Just like with the wildlife ecologist, I think that we can ask that they take a certain amount of
Okay.
time, and then they can adjust their programming to accommodate the other activities.
Is it reasonable for us to try to just give them 30 minutes, or do they need 45 minutes?
I think they need 30 minutes or less, to be truthful.
Oh.
I mean, it's tag, it's running around, it's, it's
Oh,
the prey predator.
okay.
I mean, you're talking about younger kids, that I think anything over a half hour is probably,
Well, the other thing you might want to consider also is that some of the kids, younger children like you're referring to, may want to stick around and continue to do that activity and maybe not go on the hike. And so, options are always good, I think.
Right.
yeah, no, I do think if we say 10:45, if it ends up being an hour that they spend with the kids, great. Like, I don't think we have to say this ends, it's just, if you were planning on going on the hike,
You
that's
could go ahead.
11:15, and that will fall to each family to decide if they want to stay with what the youth program's doing, or if they're going to go do their hike, or if they're going to divide and conquer. Some will stay and some will go
We
do
could
their
make it
hike.
11:30 too, instead of 11:15.
And the other thing the group may want to think about that I noticed last year is that maybe someone will want to use the bullhorn and notify, hey, everybody, this is coming, this is our next event, if you want to partake in this.
I think we want the hike to go off by 11:15, only because we're shutting down at 12. So we might catch people on their way out, or they might be out there for an hour and a half. I mean, that's fine, but I don't think we want to push it that the hike's going off, 30 minutes before we're ending.
Yeah.
Because at least if we say 11:15, we plan on having water, things like that, that people, when they come back, could at least partake of that.
And then we will have people, so they won't straggle if it takes too long and they're impatient.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? They have to wait 15 more minutes?
yeah. So we've got 9:15, 10 a.m., 10:45, 11:15.
Okay.
Those are our main things, and then...
And then equestrian etiquette, do we want to allow some time? Or that could be going on sort of around the same time as the tagging?
So I'm not sure there's enough interest there. I'm not sure there's enough
So
substance
maybe
for
we
that.
shouldn't make them go to that. The level of effort to bring the horses
Yeah.
a lot to
Yeah.
be successful.
The only interest would be having live horses. You know, we install those silly, how many spaces are there for horse trailers out there?
Yeah.
A disproportionate amount,
Yeah.
right? So if you had live horses, it doesn't really matter a whole heck of a lot about the etiquette, but the kids love the horses, you know, that kind of thing. And it just gives another fun attraction. Do we have horses coming, or was it just horse etiquette?
So we had discussed this, I think, at the last meeting, that we were not, because of liability or something,
Yeah, we
that
were-
we're not going to have horses apparently at this, which is, kind of takes away the allure of having a specific topic on horse etiquette, what we
So
call
you-
equestrian trail etiquette, so I'm not even sure that should be a bullet point.
Was the liability if they just get on them? Are they allowed to touch them, or?
I think it was if they even if they go near them, if anybody's close enough to touch them or do anything, I don't know that, yeah, that we would, that the town would be assuming
I
some
don't think
type
you
of
need the
liability.
extra fleshing out of this program, so I think you can lose all the horse business.
Maybe it's just
And I
more
think we had it as part of trail etiquette. I think
Yes.
we could just combine it there.
which kind of also does the running club and the bike control. It's more just, we were trying to also enforce some trail etiquette for folks, just having resources that folks would.
Right, and
be able to-
diversity.
And diversity,
Not
yeah.
just-
I'll look back. I think I had created sort of a trail etiquette pamphlet for last year, and I can print out a bunch of those again, and I think I did have equestrian etiquette, because most people don't realize horse first, then pedestrian, then bike. People are shocked by that, but you just have to think about size.
So Sean had brought up some time ago when we were talking about maps, and I'm not trying to move it on to maps,
No.
but that there might be maps out there, and these are the two that, I don't know if they just got refilled recently or what, but those are both out of the Colton Trailhead, so.
Oh, fabulous. And then are we doing,
Do we have the maps coming from marketing?
Katie's working on, Katie Rummel, staff, event coordinator, manager, is working on the maps.
Do we know if we'll have them in time, or if there's a risk there?
We should have them on time. I guess there's always a risk with dealing with a vendor, but we should have them on time.
Are we having to buy them, or are we just getting them
We are buying them.
from the county?
It's not, the county isn't buying them, it's the town, and the town's going to purchase those from not the open space
Funds?
advisory committee funding.
Oh, okay.
so yeah, just the town is doing it, and originally
Because I
we
remember we
thought-
talked about that we'd have to put in.
We talked about an OSAC and youth committee doing it together, but then it turns out the town will purchase a certain amount of them. And this, I think, gets filled in, like, so it's great that Boulder did it, like their ranger program, but I think last year they were all gone on any given day, they could be there or be gone.
And then the other one, I don't know if you want to go off of that, that's trail etiquette, is the other one, Sharon, what we're talking about. Use that in any way, feel free.
Yeah, and maybe we want to contact, and I'll take this on, getting enough of these that we have them that day, so that we're not stripping the trailhead of the ones the county put out, but I can talk to Boco and get them.
So then last, I think, since we seem to have locked down the schedule, was anything we wanted to provide. Like, I think we decided we weren't going to do individual water bottles this year, but we would do more gallons, because most of the people who came last year actually had their own refillable water, so it would be to limit trash if we just got the gallons. And then were we also thinking that we would do a little bit of like snacks?
Yep. And so I had on my plate was to bring the water and the snacks, and then I'll just submit an expense report after. I think the other open item or question that I had is we had maybe been talking in parallel about banners, and you had mentioned that the town actually is creating uniform banners that can be used.
Our banner is complete. We used it for Arbor Day.
It's very nice.
Great. And the question is,
Do we want a National Trails Day one?
do you want a National Trails Day banner? And there was also one other item, was a raffle item, if we wanted to do that again this year. And that, I feel like that helped us last year because we were able to gather all of the emails. And I think
Yeah, no, I think absolutely we do want to do the raffle item. I think we did a day pack from REI.
Yeah, and I noticed at Costco, they had the walking sticks for reasonable, they were like $35, versus REI, they're about $100. But that might be a great item and reasonably priced, if people think that would be great.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
No, I think that.
And I'm happy to, I've been sort of just making notes to myself, so I want to just get approval here, and then I'll grab those, and I'll do up the raffle cards like I did last time. That way we get their email information, and it works for you for registration process. Okay, so the raffle item, and so go ahead and do a separate National Trails Day banner. We could do the National Trails Day logo, the OSAC logo that we have, and I could probably get it from Patrick. I think we got it to make the little discs last year that we threw on the water bottles.
Do we know how much it would be, a banner?
The banners run about $60 at FedEx. They're not, I'm not talking huge or expensive. I just did one for a 50th anniversary, and I think I paid $42. We probably want to go a little bigger, so it might be 60.
Can we use last year's, or was it dated?
We never did a banner last
Yeah, we
year.
didn't have one.
Because this can then be reused every year.
Exactly. We
Yeah,
want it
so
to be
one time, we wouldn't put the dates on it, would just be
National Trails Day in OSAC, and then the National Trails Day logo.
Yeah.
And is it sufficient to do it with the OSAC logo versus the town logo, since we've already got the town banner? Do you have the town logo on the banner that's already produced?
I don't recall if the town logo was on it. It just matches all of the other committees so that when there's an event, for example, like Chili Fest, where all the committees can come out, then all the banners match. We just got that banner, and I want to say it was a couple $100, so it wasn't just like under 100. I'm sure that it was a few $100, so just something to note.
So that's a more heavy-duty vinyl type one. So I could price both and email people to see what their thoughts are.
Are you saying, however, Allison, that, would you prefer that you do the National Trails Day banner so it's copacetic with the design of everything? Or?
Well, for the National Trails Day banner, I don't think that matters.
Okay.
But definitely for the committee banner, Katie was interested in having it matching all the other committees for the other events. So, that
And I
would be
can-
up
So
to
do
you.
folks think we need a separate one, or do we think the OSAC banner is sufficient?
I personally think we're probably okay with just the OSAC. I mean, we'd only use the banner once a year, and, I mean, the idea is to use a banner to draw people, I would assume, and I think we're going to have a draw already. I'm not sure the extra value we're getting out of the National Trails Day, especially when people come talk to us. We always say, hey, it's National Trails Day, and
Are those wayfinding signs going to be out that says town event?
I can point out
Okay.
if the group would
Yeah.
like to.
Yeah, no, we can do that. And actually, to your point, we all got T-shirts this year, so, so we actually have National Trails Day
we're
T-shirts.
we're walking banners.
We have walking banners, so I don't know, I think maybe it's not necessarily worth trying to get a smaller one when we can just put the bigger OSAC one on the tent that faces out to McCaslin in the circle. So I don't
Okay.
think we need that one.
And then the other open question that I had was when we were talking about the tchotchkes for passing out, we didn't really want to spend much on it. The only one that was a potential thought was the little first aid kits that had the Band-Aid and the sunscreen. And those were nominal, like $1.75 or $2 or something. And do we want to get 100 of those?
Just a quick note, I did fill out an order. I don't know when it will arrive, but with National Trails Day Association, they offered free samples of bug repellent and sunscreen, And I went ahead and quickly filled out a request for, to cover approximately 100 people, was my guesstimation. And so just be aware that we might.
I think that's
some
probably,
extra stuff.
I think if we have that, then I don't think we need to
Suffices.
spend others. I think, what we did note last year is we might want to get like some dog biscuits or something.
Oh, that's good.
You know,
Yep.
that was part of the other reason to go with the
Yeah.
more gallon waters that.
Yeah,
um,
as long as it's cold too. If you, I have plenty of room. I have an extra fridge that I can toss them into if you want. If you don't have room, so we can make sure they're cold. I can
Yeah.
even put one in the freezer. That way, this cold water will definitely be a huge draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we got ice, and I
Yeah.
had 2 coolers
Yeah.
last year. And the other one is to have juice boxes for the kids, because those
Yes.
all went even
Yep.
above and beyond the water, so.
Yeah, so the little snacks and.
Yeah, so I have 2 coolers that I can bring if others have coolers.
I have a big one I
And then
can
I
bring.
get 5 or 6 bags of ice,
Perfect.
and we can just cool down everything. Because I think if we're doing the big boxes, only one will fit per cooler, so.
That makes sense.
If people have coolers that they can throw in the car, bring them.
Publicity, did anybody cover that already?
So we'll be in the, so for the publicity, we're going to go in the town's cycle of things that happen. So this is what you've already put up, correct, or you're planning on putting up and just removing some things now on the
That's
website?
already on the town website under events and National Trails Day. Also, what we typically do is we send out CACs. It'll appear in the newsletter, on Facebook,
E-blast.
CAC e-blast, I'm sorry, yeah.
How often and when is the first one going to go out?
They seem too tight for me, too close to the event for planning
Yeah.
purposes, so I'd love to do a little bit more than that. And I wondered if somebody could post it to 80027, is that a problem? Like, because I can finish my pamphlet, now that I have times, I can finish that and blast it to everyone tomorrow, if everyone would read it and proof it for me, and then we could all approve it.
There's a next door
and then
north
figure out
and
how
a
to
next
get it
door
to people.
south, too.
So I think once we have that, we can do it sort of as.
Out to the Girl Guides, the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But giving thought to the timing of these announcements is really important, you know, to make sure you notify people, because this is summer vacation, notify them at least several weeks in advance. And then, to me, e-blast is totally free, you know, it takes staff time. But if we want to get one out 3 weeks ahead, 2 weeks ahead, a week ahead, and the day prior, is there really any
And
problem with
I
that?
send out the e-blast for the programs that I'm involved in, and so whatever the group decides for a timeline, I'd be happy to do that.
So if we could get one out before Memorial Day, I think, well, actually this coming week, because then we're about 3 weeks out, right? We have 3 weeks this weekend, Memorial Day.
Yeah,
First weekend,
so
fourth.
maybe we could aim to send one out on Friday. We could finish up, I'll send tomorrow morning, first thing to the group, to just have you proof our little poster, 8 by 11, and then that could be
I'd
e-blasted.
probably wait till after the Morgul's this weekend.
Okay, so wait until maybe Tuesday? So let's say Tuesday?
Yeah, let that, so we don't have the conflict
Okay.
with any of those last
Yeah.
minute Morgul's
And the beginning bird walk.
and the beginning bird walks, a couple of days thereafter, you know, get this one out.
And then weekly thereafter on the same day, and then the Friday before?
Yep.
So I would send it out this Tuesday, and then the next Tuesday, and then the Friday before, is that correct? Or do you want it all Tuesdays and then the Friday before?
I think 3
Yes.
Tuesdays and then the Friday before, so 4 times.
There's also just, and I'll let you know if there's any feedback about it, but sometimes if the town sends out too many, you know, maybe there may have to be a little adjustment here and there, but I'd let you know ahead of time.
Yeah, I think we're looking for 4 to go out,
I think when you
3.
get a complaint about it, you just ignore it.
I was just going to say, yes, for forgiveness on this
More
one.
complaints, you know, but your ultimate goal.
And there's no problem with us posting to the 0027 Facebook page as long as we're not doing an official capacity, right? So,
Yeah, I think it's just, hey, this is an upcoming
Yeah.
event, so we can do that. So we have the 8027, I think people are members of Next Door, people might be members of the Mod Moms Club, like just things that go out. We do know from last year, the schools want nothing to do with it. You know, the official, like, it's just, I don't want to say they don't want anything to do with it, but they can't open it up to promote events.
Right.
So let me put it that way, that didn't sound as...
But I think Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, we should try to do it, because we actually had a gentleman give us a little heck for not being aware of it. He was actually from Broomfield, so...
I think those you need to get out right away.
Yeah.
So we have, Sean sent us
Boy Scout information.
the Boy Scout information. I know a Girl Scout leader. What we wanted to be careful about is we just sort of want to inform them, because the youth committee was sort of, you know, we originally had talked a couple of months ago about maybe involving them in the event, but I think it's more notifying them that the event's happening. They might be able to get badges and things with some of the stuff that we have going on, but we didn't want to officially ask them to be involved, because we have the town's youth committee was already providing sort of that.
Oh, aspect. Okay.
And
aspect.
also, the group might want to be aware that when I did the Star Party, I was able to look up badges for both the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. So when you distributed the emails notifying those groups of the events, they had the information to match up with the badges they could earn, and they were really happy about that.
I think that needs to be the top priority of somebody, because those troop leaders need to make this a troop activity, right? And they've only got 3 weeks to do that.
Okay. Do you have the site where you got the badges from? All right.
I could share that with you.
Yeah, if you could. If you do, and then Sean's already sent me the contact, I can send something out by the end of the week.
So for the day of, we're wearing our T-shirts, and what time are we all going to meet out there, and do we need to bring
We need to set
anything
up.
else?
We probably needed, I would say last year, would it take us about 45 minutes to set everything up?
Roughly?
Half an hour to 45
Yeah, 30 to
minutes?
45 minutes.
So I think last year we were there at 8 o'clock. We
Yeah,
met.
between 8 and 8:15.
Yeah. And the night before was when the event folks dropped off the tents, chairs, tables? And is that coordinated?
The chairs, tents, and tables will be dropped off. Our outdoor maintenance group with Parks and Rec will be setting up the tents.
Oh.
So last year they didn't set them up. they
Yeah,
just
so are we
dropped them
not
off.
setting up this year?
So last year, they just placed them behind, and we did the setup, which was fine.
Chairs were placed behind, but
The tents were also,
Yeah.
Figure it out.
We had to do all of that.
They were flat on the ground.
Yeah.
I will definitely check into that and send out an email to the group and ask about that.
because if those are set up, then I would say we need to be there at 8:30. If we're doing the
Yeah.
actual setup, then we need to be there by 8:15, but...
Yeah, I assumed that they had set the tents up, because when I arrived, the tents were up, but we set up the tables and chairs together, so.
Yeah, we were just that efficient.
Yeah, we were efficient, we were figuring it out. We had to figure out that not all the bags had all the correct equipment.
Oh, that's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, spikes were all in one bag and not...
Have to be prepared for the worst.
Yeah, so if you could just verify that with them. I mean, and then, like I said, if we have to do the tents, then I think we need to be there by 8:15,
I
8
did
o'clock,
make
8:15,
sure
and
that
then if
the-
not, 8:30 kind of suffice.
Sorry about that. I did make sure that the extra tent and table and chairs for the youth council would be present, but
Yeah.
I'll check.
So as far as our actual manpower, do we want to split it into two groups, a startup group and a closedown group, and just switch halfway through, or do we want to see who can stay, just whatever people's times are available, or how do we want to coordinate that?
I think first, do you mind if I ask first off, do we know who can actually attend out of our committee? How many will be there?
I don't think we have enough people here to determine that?
We definitely need to ping that through email, make
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's something we should just send out by email and figure that
Yeah.
out.
I know I'm planning to be there, and I don't mind staying through the 12:30, 1 o'clock. The time went by relatively fast. But we definitely do want to ensure that we have enough coverage at the end, and at the beginning and at the end, because there is a lot of effort in the tear down as well, because we do have to take the tents down, and even if we don't have to put them up, my guess is we have to put them up too. So,
So we'll sort of email that on that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I am planning on being there the whole time. I had slated that in my schedule to be there, but it might be that, like you said, it might be that you're there, but you get to go sit over and attend HawkQuest and not man a table, right? Or do something, so we can definitely figure that out from email. But I do think you're right, we need enough people committed for the beginning and for the end.
yep.
Who's going to be the official event photographer?
So,
Do that.
I think last year we kind of whipped things out just doing our phones, but if people,
Sharon wants to do that.
Yeah, and I think I had my camera, so
Yeah, I
I'll
think
do
you
that
did,
again,
sure.
and I think I just put a disc together for the town, so I'm happy to do that again.
yeah.
Cool.
All of a sudden, this committee has a lot of work, don't they?
So Allison, I have you for maps and then potentially the sunscreen and whatnot if National Trails Day's able to send it. I'm down for snacks, the raffle gift. I'll bring some Band-Aids just so that we have them in case anyone needs it. Dog biscuits and my camera for taking photos
In water.
and water.
For a raffle gift, there is some, I understand from my son's girlfriend, there's some great Camelback backpacks at Costco right now that actually have space for other stuff than just the bladder. So.
I bought one of those.
Is it nice?
There are
They work
some
great.
great carbon fiber trekking poles, too.
And that was the trekking poles that I saw, so maybe we have two gifts if they're both reasonably priced or
Priced,
something.
yeah.
I think the backpack was like $20, 25
Yeah, and the
bucks.
poles were like 34, so I think that's within range, we could do both.
Yeah. It was
Have them
it.
as two separate prizes, so that they feel like they have more opportunity to win.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. Perfect. Okay, so
As far as actually doing any outreach with the schedules, I've already emailed Rocky Mountain Rescue Group to see if they can do it at 9:15, but let's just not put those exact times out there until I can make sure that's not too early for them.
Okay.
So I will let everybody know ASAP when they get back to me.
Good.
And maybe I'll put some caveat.
I'll put some caveat that these are approximate times.
And the group might want to get all that information to me before Tuesday.
Great. That would be good.
That works.
So I think we've got that all planned out. That's what we had on our official agenda, so there's nothing else that folks want to
I think
add.
the only thing is maybe who would take ownership of hitting the publicity sites, Nextdoor, 0027, Mud Moms.
I can take Muslims, I can't do Nextdoor, I'm not a member of that.
I can do the next door for Sagamore, even though I don't live there anymore, I'm still part of that network. I'm not on any of the
if you
other.
forward me your next door to Sagamore, I'll do it on next door south.
Okay, whatever I type up, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. I still have the language that I used last year, so I'll pretty much just copy and adjust the dates.
And I can do it for the 80027, so I'll do both of those.
And Patricia. Okay,
Yep.
just so we know who's actually doing it.
Perfect.
And we'll all proofread it, and then I'll give you each the PDF that you can post.
I don't know that they'll let us do a
Oh, they might
PDF,
just say
it
it.
just literally is, I think, the
Like a text
blurb
message.
for the
Yeah.
Facebooks, because every time you see on the Facebooks, it always says removed from, the
Okay.
admin, they don't really,
I wrote up like a paragraph that was.
and I took it from you.
Yeah,
and
I
then-
say, I'll dig that
So
up.
maybe I have the two of you work that then.
Yep.
I'll still
Yeah.
do some posters and maybe leave them at the Starbucks and things like that in Safeway.
But who's doing the scouts?
I'm doing the scouts, so Allison's going to send me the badge thing, and then I'll email, I have those contacts to email, and I'll try to do that by Friday, so that they have ample time to plan any events.
And Sharon, if you can't get around to taking things to Starbucks or businesses, just let me know, and I'm happy to print and post them.
Okay, awesome. So maybe between the two of us, we can get that one. think we have a plan.
Great. So did anybody have anything else that they needed added to the agenda?
Just one little tangent. How aggressively are we pursuing the level 3 property at this point? When was the last time we contacted anyone at that company?
Town staff is in constant contact with Level 3 every month, probably.
I just noticed they posted profits, so I didn't know if that was not to our benefit or what their plan was.
They're making money, so therefore they don't need to earn money by selling the property.
And off-topic as well, the Phillips 66 property, I saw that on the agenda for your meeting.
I don't think there's
Has anyone had any
anything
updates?
happening with that, but I'm going to be eager to find out.
Yeah, maybe just let us know when you find out, I'm just curious. Last I heard, it was still dead.
What are they doing on the other side of that property? They're building, it looked like they were building roads. I think you had brought that up a while ago.
And I think that I've seen more activity, and I think it's just part of the CDOT project, that they're just offloading dirt on and off up on the property.
And were you referencing the little property that I had mentioned? Or pointing to me? There's a tiny little
Yes.
property that we had talked about at the beginning of the meeting that looks like it's by the Ridge condos, in between the Ridge condos and probably the water treatment plant.
That is for sale?
Yeah, that's for
Yep.
sale.
I believe that's just, there's another commercial development that is in the comp plan between Key Bank and the Ridge. It's a commercial office building.
Okay.
And I assume that the owners of that land might have it up for sale, but I will check more
Okay.
into that.
Great.
So if that was it, then we are adjourned. Thank you.